G'day, welcome to Down in the Woodworks. As you might be aware, I've had my woodworking vise installed now for quite a while, and I did film the install process, but I have no idea why I didn't post a video. This particular vise was from Hare Forbes Machinery House, and on their website they have installation tips, which are a set of 8 photos featuring our old mate Jordan Crawford installing the vise. But the comments are pretty basic, so I thought I'd do an install video. The first thing to do was to take the vise apart into its pieces, which was as simple as undoing these 2 socket head screws and taking off the backing plate and removing the mounting plate, which also has the quick release mechanism. These types of vices don't come with jaws or a handle. You have to supply/make them yourself. So for the wooden jaws, I had this piece of solid merbau that was 620 by 290 mil and 42 mil thick. A perfect size to rip in half to make the front and rear jaws. First thing I did was install the rear jaw to the bench flush with the top of the bench. You can install the guide plate to the underside of the bench first. I just chose to do it this way. I lined up the rear jaw using a flat board clamped to the top of the bench and marked the mounting holes to screw the jaw to the edge of the bench. I drilled out the holes for the screws and then clamped the jaw back in place to transfer those holes to the edge of the bench, so I could then drill some pilot holes for the 100mm or 4-inch screws I used to fix the jaw in place. To bolt the mounting plate to the underside of the bench, I had to make up a spacer block because the thickness of my bench is only 34mm. With the 3 layers of melamine under the bench, the total thickness was 84mm. With the spacers in place, I used my combination square to transfer the underside of the spacer to the front of the rear jaw, so I could then line up the quick release mounting plate. After making sure I had the mounting plate in the correct position and orientation, I traced out the holes for the guide bars and the spindle. 25mm for the guide bars and 30mm for the spindle. I drilled the holes using the drill press and then used the rear jaw to mark the same hole locations on the front jaw by using the relevant sized Forstner bit. This is the easiest way of finding the centre mark of the holes because of the dimple that's in the centre of the Forstner bit. I then drilled the holes the same way in the front jaw off camera. Next job was to mark the mounting holes in the guide plate onto one of the melamine layers. And then I screwed the 3 layers together and drilled the holes all the way through using the drill press. I then clamped the spacer in place under the bench and drilled the holes all the way through. I needed to recess the holes on the top of the bench for the head of the bolts, so I had to use a guide to center the bit over the bolt holes. Once the guide plate was bolted in place, I could reinstall the rear jaw to the bench checking that it was flush with the top. This is when I noticed one of the bolts was in the way of the left guide bar. Why the guide plate has a mounting hole there, I have no idea. Luckily there was another mounting hole, so I just re-drilled it. You'll notice in this shot there are 4 holes in the bench instead of 3. Anyway, time to install the vise. And this was a little tricky and fiddly on your own, because of trying to hold the vise with one hand and manipulate the quick release mechanism into place with the other. But I managed without swearing too much. With the front jaw lined up with the rear and clamped in place, I could then position the front plate Drill some pilot holes and fix the front plate to the jaw. With short, heavy-duty countersunk hex head screws with a little beeswax on the threads. I made the handle for the vise out of some 25mm dowel and these curtain rod holders, with a wooden plug screwed onto the end of the dowel and painted black. Pretty simple really. The only thing left to do was apply a finish, which was boiled linseed oil. Like I said, I've had this vise for quite a while and I do use it a lot and it's great. It's by no means an expensive vise. It does suffer from racking, but you learn to work your way around these things, as you know. If you're clamping something for most of the width of the vise, it's great. But if you are clamping something at one end, it will rack. But all I've done is make myself one of these. I have no idea what you would call it. It's just a bunch of ply fingers bolted together. And yeah, if you've got a piece at one end of the vise, you just drop this onto the other end, kind of self-adjusts, and that stops racking. Well, thanks for watching along, and hopefully that video was helpful to someone. I know these are unprecedented times during our lives, but just chin up everyone, stay positive, stay at home, wash your hands, and until the next video, you guys all have a great day.